Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of Last year, I had the first opportunity ever to go to Disney World. And not only was this an opportunity to go there, but it was an opportunity to go there with my fiance and my future in-laws, which I had never been on a vacation with them before. So overall, this was a pretty special trip. But as you can imagine, once we got inside the gates of Disney, I was like a kid on Halloween night, and there was so much eye candy that I was just running around everywhere. We went on Splash Mountain, Space Mountain, Peter Pan's Flight. It's a Small World, and as you probably have guessed, I'm saving the best for last. My personal favorite, the Haunted Mansion. But not only did I have fun while at Disney, I gained a really cool story while I was there too, and it does regard the Haunted Mansion. Pretty much what happened was, as Carrie and I were meandering around, we ended up in Liberty Square. At this time, a rainstorm hit, so we took shelter in the closest place we could find, which was an awning that we were able to go under. And lo and behold, it was the awning that allowed the line to enter, as you guessed, the Haunted Mansion. So while we were in line, I jokingly said to Carrie, I'm like, oh God, we are such a stereotype. We are two gays taking shelter inside of an elaborate mansion to avoid the storm. And once we got inside, I was hit with nothing but just nostalgia, and I returned to being a kid. And the reason why I say this is because as I was growing up, my mom had a VHS recording of Disney's Halloween Treat that had come on one year at Halloween. And so I had grown up watching that year after year after year. And at the end of that feature, there's some scenes that take place inside the Haunted Mansion. So going inside and actually seeing these scenes for the first time was really something special for me. And by the way, they still need to release Disney's Halloween Treat on DVD. Hopefully one year. I doubt it'll be this year, but hopefully one year they will do it. But I wanted to go back on the ride, and I couldn't because we were time limited. So before we left Liberty Square, we went into the Haunted Mansion's gift shop, which is Memento Mori. And while we were in there, we were able to load up on some artwork, some vinyl records, and to my surprise, I actually found a series of books called Tales from the Haunted Mansion that is a fictionalized series of that attraction. Tales from the Haunted Mansion, Volume 1, The Fearsome Foursome by Amicus Arcane is the first book in a 4-book series. I'm not certain if the series has plans to go beyond the 4th book, but at the moment there are only 4 books. This one opens introducing Amicus Arcane, who is the Haunted Mansion's librarian, and he claims that he has 999 ghost stories to share. After his introduction, he introduces 4 main characters with a very witty tone. These characters are Willa, Steve, Noah, and Tim. These are 4 middle schoolers who have started a group called the Fearsome Foursome, and the intent of this group is to meet on dark nights where they tell scary stories, and the person who has told the scariest story will win ice cream the next day. Imagine, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Well, after they've been telling these stories, their clubhouse gets destroyed by a storm, and in the rubble, they discover there's a letter to them from Amicus. And in this letter, he extends out the welcome for them to come to the Haunted Mansion where they can have a place to tell their stories. Well, without much deliberation or debate, they decide to run off to the Haunted Mansion, and once they're inside, they go down a secret passage that leads them to the Grand Library. Here, they meet none other than Amicus. With their introduction, Tim explains what they do and how they win ice cream if, they win ice cream if a person tells a scary story that wins above the other three. And Amicus is pretty intrigued, so he admits that he has some scary stories to share of his own. With the kids wanting to know what these stories are, they sit down and listen to some of the scariest stories they will ever hear in their existence. Aside from Tales from the Haunted Mansion being based on Disney's theme park attraction, it does grab inspiration from literary and cinematic classics. While it name drops Poe and Lovecraft, some of the stories featured in this volume are also in the same vein of these icons. But more so, the book pays its greatest homage to the classic British movie company called Amicus Productions. Back in its heyday, Amicus released a lot of trailblazing classics that include Torture Garden, The House That Dripped Blood, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, The Vault of Horror, and Tales from the Crypt, which the last movie features the pop culture icon himself, the Crypt Keeper. This was actually before we knew him as the ghoul that all of us 90s kids grew up loving. Such as those movies, this book follows the same frame story formula, and without argument, Amicus is Disney's Crypt Keeper. By the way, if you're curious to what amicus means, it means an impartial advisor, often voluntary, to a court of law in a particular case. That makes sense because throughout the book, Amicus has a judge's demeanor, and the children really seem like their own trial. Fun facts. 2019 makes the 50th year anniversary for Disney's The Haunted Mansion. And as you might expect, some of the tricks within its walls are based on historic magic illusions, and these illusions still baffle young audiences today. Heck, they probably still baffle adults today. But with the illusions that are used, they are simply nothing more than glass and reflection that are utilized to produce holograms. Now, among the three homes, there are architectural differences between each one of the three, and they are set up at different locations of the theme park. Now, at the one that I went to in Disney World, from my understanding, it is larger than the Disneyland location, but it is smaller than the Tokyo location. Maybe if you've been to these locations, you can elaborate a little bit more. I would love to see your response if you have been to more than just one location so you can give more of an accurate comparison. But now that we've covered the facts, it's time to move on to one of my favorite subjects. Throughout the years, there have been quite a few urban legends that have sprung up about Disneyland's most scary attraction. Supposedly, the Disneyland mansion is actually haunted because people have left behind the ashes of their cremated loved ones. Another legend regarding this location is originally the haunted mansion was so frightening that it actually gave a guest a heart attack. Now, with the final legend, I'm not sure exactly which location this is rumored to have happened at, but supposedly Madame Leota's spell book in the seance room was actually a cursed book that had real spells within its binding. Now that I've discussed the book and what inspired it, it's time to move on to the spoilers. Pretty much, if you haven't read this title and you would like to enter with a clean slate, you need to refer to the description section of this video. Here, you will find a timestamp that if you were to click on it, it should direct you to the Thoughts chapter. In the last video I did, the timestamp did not work, so for your convenience, I have provided a second timestamp that is pinned at the top of the comments. You have 17 seconds to choose either one to move yourself away from the spoilers. Ready, set, go. Now that everyone has had a chance to click away, I would like to discuss some scenes and themes that I was surprised to read about in a young adult book by Disney, but here we are. So the first story that really took me by surprise was Lonigan's Glove. And in this, we have the character Tim, who has stolen a haunted baseball glove from a flea market vendor who turns out to be a voodoo priest. Well, it's not necessarily the concept here that's disturbing or shocking, but it's a theme that comes into the story. And what I mean by that is the scene where he and Willa are trying to get to the bottom of why the glove is haunted. Willa discovers that Lefty Lonigan had committed suicide. And this necessarily wasn't a theme that I was expecting to read about in a Disney book. But as the story progresses, the final scene of the tale does become fairly graphic, and it becomes graphic in a descriptive sense on the zombies that are filling the abandoned stadium that Tim is inside. And the way that this is portrayed reminds me of some of the imagery that the Tales from the Crypt comics might have portrayed in their pages. But as this is being set, the scene that really kind of pushes it over the edge is when Tim gets beheaded. And even though it could go darker in this direction, the author takes it in this direction and makes it comedic. And the comedy here is very similar to what the zombie portrayed in Hocus Pocus when he had his head kicked off. So what could be really dark ends up getting kind of covered over. Another story that really took me by surprise was called The Dare. In this, we have the character Steve, who is known as the Dare King of his school. And pretty much, if you dare Steve to do it, he's going to do it. And he has had this reputation for quite some time until a rival shows up at his school and threatens his reputation. And so Steve is getting really jealous about this new kid who's taken on all these dares, and he discovers the new kid is claustrophobic. So he concocts a dare for the new kid to spend an hour in a coffin with the lid closed. And the new kid takes the offer, and as this is going on, Steve has concocted a joke to pull on him, but the joke backfires and Steve ends up in a coffin where he gets buried alive. Even though that's disturbing, it's more so, again, how it's executed that makes it even more disturbing. And it made me question if this was young adult appropriate. Well, I thought back to what we were reading when we were in junior high, which this book is intended for the ages of junior high kids, I believe. And when we were in junior high, one of the stories that was mandatory reading was Edgar Allan Poe's The Cask of Amontillado. So between the two, they kind of equal out. Character-wise, I did not like any of the kids, and the reason why is because they were all entitled little brats. Now, granted, these kids were not the poster children for safe sex, but at the end of the day, they weren't going to win any Good Samaritan awards. Among them, I would say Willa and Noah were the lesser of the evils. Now, Willa was nothing but just a little bitch to her brother. And I guess that kind of comes with siblings. I don't know. I'm an only child, so that's not my territory. But Willa was a bitch to her little brother. And Noah, he was totally entitled when it came down to doing what he was supposed to. And this is in regards to what his stepfather had requested of him to do. But at the same time, his stepfather really wasn't that great of a guy. But still, stepfather has authority over a kid. Just saying. But Noah did, at the very least, try to save himself and his stepfather at the end of Sea Creatures. So I would say Noah is the only character that really had a redeeming quality in the book. But with Tim and Steve, these two little turds. Oh, okay, so Tim is nothing but a thief. Point blank, end of story. Tim's a thief. Moving on. Steve was probably the worst of the four. And what I mean by this is he has no regards or respect for other people's well-being. And with Steve, he has a mentality about himself where I could eventually see him turning into the kind of person where either at the beginning or end of his statements, he would say, bruh. Now, he never said bruh in the book, but I'm just saying later in life, he's totally one of those guys that annoy the hell out of you by going, bruh, bruh. And I could eventually see in his adulthood, a serious conversation would be like, bruh, 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 bruh. Anyway, that was Steve. But yeah, I would say that the character development was good. It was enough where I did not like any of the kids, and it made it even all the better when they got what they had coming to them. There is so much about this book that I absolutely adore, and it's mostly because it knows how to pay homage to the horror genre and the authors who built it. Although it does pay a great deal of respects to Amicus Productions, almost all of the stories in this has its own particular nod to other pieces of classic literature. Examples of this, in the story Witchbone, which is Willa's story, there is a nod to W. Jacobs' The Monkey's Paw, and similar to that story, it warns to be careful what you wish for. In the story Sea Creatures, which has the character Noah in it, there's a good throwback to Lovecraft. And even though the story features sea monkeys, these are not your typical sea monkeys. These are sea creatures that come from a company called the Eldridge Company.
Is there something in your eye?
No, you get what I'm saying here. Eldridge, sea creatures, Lovecraft. Come on, Lovecraft. Eldridge, sea creatures, Lovecraft.
Who?
Sorry about that. I had to get my cat to calm my nerves. Anyway, back to Disney and Lovecraft. So, in this story, the creatures reminded me of the ones that are in Dagon, and that's one of my favorite Lovecraft stories. But there's not much of a social commentary with this tale. I guess if I had to say it commented on anything, it is to respect your elders, and also definitely do not use a discontinued comic to purchase things from a company called the Eldridge Company. In the story The Dare, which features Steve, this is what would happen, in my opinion, if Edgar Allan Poe's The Cask of Amontillado took place in modern times with middle school kids. And I would say the moral of this story is to recognize when you've been defeated and make peace with that before it becomes your own undoing. The only story that I really couldn't tie to a classic author or story was Lonergan's Glove. And the closest that I can make a connection with was it reminded me of The Big Toe, which is in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. The moral that I found in this story was simply don't be entitled. Don't believe the world owes you, because it doesn't. I absolutely enjoyed this book, and I highly recommend it. I believe that for kids who are preteen, it should be pretty safe for them to read as long as they're already familiar with like R.L. Stine's Goosebumps series. Now, granted, this book is a little bit more risque than those classics, but I guess ages 13 and up, I guess that's what this book is aiming for, ages 13 and up. Now, with me being an adult, I did still very much love this book. It was a fun throwback, and truth be it, it's ideal for a weekend read. It's quick, easy, very comprehensive, and it's fun for horror lovers of most ages. So, grab this. Now, I did also get this on audiobook, and I downloaded that from Audible. The reason why is because I was curious how a voice actor could narrate the book, especially the Amicus character, and I'm glad that I downloaded it. The reason why is because the voice actor who read this book really breathes in this whimsically creepy style for Amicus, and it was really a fun thing to listen to. But with the book, I'm happy I have that as well because it stands as a physical reminder of when I went to Disney with my fiance and future in laws. That's my review for Tales from the Haunted Mansion. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And feel free to leave in the comments anything that you might have experienced with the Haunted Mansion, because from my understanding, everyone has their own story about visiting the Haunted Mansion for the first time. And let's have some fun. Do you think that the Haunted Mansion is actually haunted? And also, do you know any more urban legends? I had spoken 3 urban legends about the Disney Haunted Mansion in this video, so if you know any more about this attraction, please load them up in the comments because I love urban legends. Before I head out, I would like to thank Alicia Graves and Joseph Baylott. They recently contributed to my Patreon, and I really do appreciate that contribution. While we are on the subject of Patreon, I just want to let people know there's no obligation to contribute to that. I'm still going to make videos no matter what, but at the same time, I do appreciate your contributions. So if you do contribute, I will mention at the end of my videos your name and give you a special thank you. If you would like to follow my Patreon or hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, all of those links are going to be in the description section of this video. Well, until next time, hit that notification bell, click subscribe, and have sweet nightmares.